name is Mumia Abu-Jamal. I'm on death row in Pennsylvania. I'm ex-president of the Association of Black Journalists of Philadelphia. I'm still a continuing revolutionary journalist, and I write for anybody who wants me to write for them. And I'm fighting my conviction, fighting the sentence, fighting for my life, and fighting to create revolution in America. Yes, I am a political prisoner.
From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
It was the eruption of the civil rights movement against Jim Crow segregation that shattered the McCarthyite Cold War climate of the 50s. The whole world watched as peaceful demonstrations demanding the right to vote were attacked by the police and the Ku Klux Klan. The civil rights movement challenged racist white America and gave rise to a generation of young radicals. But it did not lead to black freedom.
Revolution means change. It means total change.
When the movement came north in the mid-60s, it collided head-on with economic and social reality. The hellish conditions of ghetto life, the mass chronic unemployment, racist police brutality. These could only be solved through social revolution.
Very recently, the Census Bureau said something like 31 million people were in poverty. Other records say that there's 3.1 million people who are homeless in America. You've got people who do not have the basic needs fulfilled. They can't eat, they can't have shelter, they can't have clothing.
In Chicago in 1966, the struggle for racial equality meant a confrontation with the political machine of Democratic Party Mayor Richard Daley. After being stoned in the racist white enclave of Marquette Park, Martin Luther King called off a planned march for nearby Cicero. When 200 demonstrators from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, went ahead with the Cicero March, they were met by a howling, brick-throwing mob. The civil rights movement was stopped in its tracks. It was during this time that Mumia Abu-Jamal came of political age. In 1967, as a young high school student, Jamal, then known as Wes Cook, was already a fighter.
As a youth in the 60s, I was impressed by the Black Power movement that was sweeping Black America and the Black world in Africa and the Caribbean.
He was one of the leaders of a mass movement to rename Benjamin Franklin High School for Malcolm X, part of a citywide battle for black studies in the public high schools, which culminated in a protest at school board headquarters on November 17, 1967. The Philadelphia police attacked the student protest. The police were led by Police Commissioner Frank Rizzo.
So I remember me and a brother named Eddie Jones and a few other brothers, about 4 or 5 brothers from North Philly, went to a demonstration in South Philadelphia. It's at the Philadelphia Spectrum, which is a big sporting arena. This was 1968, and it was the presidential nomination of George Corley Wallace III. I think that's his name. But he was running for president on the American Independent Party. In retrospect, it's kind of crazy to think that we would go down to a demonstration in South Philadelphia, which is like predominantly white, and protest against George Wallace coming to Philadelphia. But at that time, you know, we believed that it was our city as well. So we did it, and every one of us got our asses kicked by plainclothes policemen. You probably heard the tale, "I beat you so bad your own mama won't know you." Well, it has a particular relevance to me because as I was laying in the hospital, charged with assault and aggravated assault and beating of a police officer, my own mother walked by me, looked me dead in the eyes, and kept walking because she couldn't recognize me. I was beaten unrecognizable. I was in my mid-teens at that time. From that period and from those experiences, from me having to go through the hell of that and seeing the complete lack of power of people to resist that, I was attracted to the Black Panther Party. You know? So because there was not a functioning, active Black Panther Party at that time, we founded one and built one in Philadelphia. I was beaten into the Black Panther Party.
The Black Panther Party represented the best of a generation of militant black youth. They rejected the turn-the-other-cheek pacifism of Martin Luther King and stood for armed self-defense.
I believe that it's a natural right and principle of life for all people to defend themselves. I believe that years ago when I was a Panther. I believe it when I got exposed to the MOVE organization. I believe it now. Self-defense is a natural right, you know, and no one can take that away from you.
There was a national campaign to destroy the Black Panthers by infiltration, arrest, and murder, designed and carried out by the White House and J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. This program killed 38 Panthers. The FBI mandate was to disrupt and destroy the Black Panther Party, including by fabricating evidence and perjured testimony. From May 1967 to December 1969, the Panthers were hit with 768 arrests and almost $5 million in bail bonds.
The COINTELPRO program was a terroristic program. Its function was to terrorize radicals, revolutionaries, opponents of government programs, and to stigmatize and isolate them from the general population.
In September 1969, the police raided the party headquarters at 19th and Columbia. They would have shot us then, Jamal said, except for the community presence. The office was ransacked, files taken, mimeograph machine gone. On December 4, 1969, Chicago Panther leaders Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were murdered by the Chicago police under the direction of the FBI. A week later, in Philadelphia's Church of the Advocate, Jamal was the first speaker at a 1,000-strong memorial for their slain comrades. He said, "The only thing on Hampton's bed was blood and a book by Lenin. He was murdered. We're trying to tell people that there is no need for any more Fred Hamptons or Bobby Huttons."
In all the years that I was a Panther and before I became a Panther, make no mistake, the government tried very viciously to wipe out the Black Panther Party. The point is, they tried to kill Panthers. They shot, they sent in grenades, they bombed, they did all that stuff.
A month after the murder of Hampton and Clark, in January 1970, at the height of COINTELPRO, the Philadelphia Panthers were featured in a front-page Philadelphia Inquirer article. Their spokesman was 16-year-old Jamal, Minister of Information of the branch. Explaining their free breakfast program, Jamal said, "The Black Panther Party is doing what the churches are supposed to do." He continued, saying, "Genocide is coming to the forefront under Nixon, Agnew, and Mitchell regime. And that's exactly what it is.
What you mean, what
The
changes?
Panther Party is an
We have a black man
uncompromising
dead,
party.
murdered.
It faces
Black
reality."
things, that's a change.
That summer, 1970, Jamal joined the staff of the Panther National Office in California and wrote for the party's newspaper, the Black Panther.
My career as a journalist began with the Black Panther newspaper in Philadelphia and on the Black Panther newspaper in California. There is where I learned how to write, learned how to write from a revolutionary perspective, perhaps.
On August 29, 1970, Police Commissioner Rizzo staged multiple raids on Panther offices around the city. Panther members were stripped in the street. Less than a week later, the Black Panther Party convened the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention at Temple University in Philadelphia. Jamal returned from California and served on the security team. Jamal's Panther activity did not go unnoticed by government authorities.
In my case, where you have the police who moved against me since a youth because of my Black Panther history and before, with no criminal background, the political nature is clearly evident.
He was named in a House of Representatives committee report on internal security. The government bided its time.
They sent letters, smut letters, from husbands to wives, you know? They sent letters to employers, you know, stigmatizing people. They sent letters from one radical organization to another radical organization to try to incite violence between those two organizations. In fact, in the Black Panther Party out in LA in 1973, I think it was, in 1969, I believe, there was a brother named Bunchy Carter who was killed because of a conflict with the US organization, because there were letters going between the organizations that were not authored by Panthers. They were authored by FBI agents in some dark office in California to incite hatred and division between radical groups.
In the end, the Black Panther Party was destroyed by both police terror from without and a murderous internal factionalism inflamed by COINTELPRO provocations. During the next 10 years, Jamal wrote and broadcast. His voice was heard on the National Black Network and many Philadelphia radio stations. His work was guided by the, quote, principle that we are oppressed black human beings first. He was elected president of the Philadelphia chapter of the Association of Black Journalists at age 26 in November 1980. He was named by Philadelphia Magazine as one of its people to watch in 1981. He became known as the voice of the voiceless, and among those voiceless was the MOVE organization.
I met MOVE while covering them in Philadelphia. I became exposed to them as opposed to reading about them, and found out that what I read about them had no relationship to the kind of people they were and what they were about. That every published report was tinged with prejudice and hatred. MOVE members have been active and above ground in Philadelphia since 1973. They've been through every jail in Philadelphia. They've been beaten in every police district all over Philadelphia for standing up for their belief to defend life.
The police will be in there to drag them out by the backs of their necks.
There will be a confrontation this time. There will be no barricades.
I don't know. It's up to them whether no barricades, Mike. They're going to be taken by force if they resist. No question about that. Children or not.
In 1978, Frank Rizzo escalated the war on the MOVE organization. The MOVE commune in Philadelphia's Powelton Village was razed by police bulldozers. An army of police fired untold rounds into the house despite the presence of children. Former Panther Delbert Africa was savagely beaten.
Kicking them on the head. I have no idea. I just couldn't see.
Get up! Cops can make a mistake doing that. Your ass, they are.
During the police crossfire, one cop was killed.
There was an incredible response by the city. I'm talking like 700 cops, a siege around the neighborhood, and it really continued day by day until it built up to August 8th, 1978, which is the case of a police assault on MOVE headquarters, maybe 500 policemen. What people may not know is that the arms that MOVE had were inoperable, that they were there to show the police that MOVE was serious about defending the home, but they had no firing pins. They couldn't work.
Jamal covered the MOVE story and attended the August 8th press conference, which Rizzo called to defend his brutal assault.
The press has to take a little of blame here. They've glorified a bunch of criminals, a new breed of journalism that doesn't want both sides, only one side of the issue. The press is responsible for what's happening in this city.
Jamal became, in his own words, a widely known and among cops, widely hated MOVE supporter who went to jails to get the Africa's side of the August 8th, 78 confrontation. He was deeply impressed by the refusal of MOVE members to be broken during the trial for the death of the cop.
I was seduced into the MOVE organization by the loveliness and goodness of its people and its members. I was probably enraged as well as sitting in a trial in an official capacity, objective as a journalist, and seeing that the law really didn't matter, that it didn't matter whether a man was innocent or guilty. It didn't matter what the law says your rights were. You just had 9 members of the MOVE organization being sentenced to 30 to 100 years for a crime that everybody knew they did not commit. I mean, 9 people cannot kill one man. What you had in Philadelphia in '81 was the naked state judicial terrorism of the Philadelphia judiciary against the MOVE organization. It was like, let's wipe them out. It's impossible for me to say what my feelings were in that time. Sitting in a courtroom, seeing that kind of naked injustice, it rankled me to the core.
In 1985, the state's vendetta against MOVE culminated in Mayor Wilson Good's bombing of the Osage Avenue house, which left 11, including 5 children, dead.
It was the Philadelphia Police Department. It was the state government of Pennsylvania. It was the FBI, the ATF of the U.S. government who bombed MOVE people on May 13, 1985. But no one would call any of those organizations or their employer, the U.S. government, terrorists. But why weren't they? They created mass murder, Holocaust, in a major city in America, and not one of them have ever been charged with any crime at all. Only Ramona Africa, guilty only of survival, is in jail following May 13, 1985.
Because he was an outspoken partisan of the oppressed and defender of the MOVE organization, at age 26, Jamal was well known throughout the city. On December 9, 1981, he was accused of the killing of a cop on the streets of Philadelphia. Jamal saw a cop beat his brother, who had been stopped for an alleged traffic violation. Jamal rushed in, taking a near-fatal bullet in the stomach. When the smoke cleared, the cop was dead. Jamal was sitting on a curb, bleeding profusely. Even the day after he was arrested, the Philadelphia Inquirer headlined, quote, "Jamal, an eloquent activist not afraid to raise his voice," close quote.
I was charged with homicide of a police officer in Philadelphia. I was convicted of murder in the first degree and sentenced to death.
The court denied his request to represent himself and resources to prepare his defense. Of the prospective black jurors, all but one were excluded because of their race, while admittedly prejudiced white jurors were chosen to decide Jamal's fate. One prosecution witness said she saw a short man of roughly 200 pounds shoot the cop. Jamal was 6 feet 1 inch and 170 pounds at the time. A white cab driver testified that the shooter wore an afro. Jamal wore dreadlocks. Jamal had 15 character witnesses, one of them the renowned poet Sonia Sanchez, whom, incredibly, the judge slandered as a friend of cop killers.
One of the things that links my background with MOVE organization and with the Black Panther Party is at the sentencing hearing, the sentencing phase of the trial. The prosecutor introduced an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which was an interview with me when I was a young teen, when I was lieutenant of information of the Black Panther Party, and cross-examined me on that article, you know.
The DA used Jamal's membership in the Black Panther Party 12 years earlier to convince the jury that he was a committed cop killer. DA: do you recall saying, "All power to the people"? Jamal: yes. DA: do you believe your actions as well as your philosophy are consistent with the quote, "Political power grows out the barrel of a gun"? Jamal: I believe that America has